Spirit of the North is a new game that has released on Nintendo Switch, which is what I'm playing here, as well as PC, and I am 99% sure PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It would be very surprising indeed if it was not on those consoles. It so badly wants to be Journey, to get that upfront right from the start. It wants to be this simultaneously soaring and melancholic experience, and it wants to tell a rich and emotive story without using a word of dialogue, just like what happens in Journey. Most of all though, it wants to be beautiful, just like Journey. It wants people to focus on that sense of beauty as the kind of core focus of the game. Now, there's nothing wrong with being inspired by a game as powerful as Journey, of course, and there are plenty of other games that have likewise looked to that masterpiece for inspiration. However, and this is a really big but, there is a fine line between being inspired by something and being a pastiche of it. Spirit of the North, unfortunately, is a pastiche. The thing is, though, it is very difficult to dislike Spirit of the North, because while it has fallen into the territory of being a pastiche, it is very noble in its intent. Putting aside the inherent goodness of wanting to create a game that lifts players up and doesn't rely on violence to engage, Spirit of the North is also rooted in Nordic folklore and takes place in the expanses of Iceland. Now, you all know by now that I am constantly banging the drum for games that inspire players to learn, and Spirit of the North does that. It really wants you to come away from the game with a new respect and interest in Nordic folklore, and indeed, after playing this game, I did come away with that. I don't know as much about Nordic folklore as I would like to, and this game has certainly made me interested in learning a little bit more. You also play as a fox, and that is a plus for the game all in itself. I love foxes, and a favourite game of mine is called Never Alone. It's a game that features an Arctic fox, and the game itself is designed to inspire people to want to learn about native cultures. Foxes are magnificent animals, and it is so obvious that the developers really wanted to capture everything from the movement and mannerisms of the fox just right. Even on the Nintendo Switch, which again is the one that you're seeing me play here, where the hardware has limited the technical detail that the developers could squeeze into the game, it is clearly a labour of love. And yet, for all of that, it is difficult to shake the impression that Spirit of the North is simply dull. As with most pastiches, there's that tiny X factor, that last 5%, that just doesn't come across from the original work into this one. And rather than being its own game, Spirit of the North is like an off-brand take on that other game that it wants to be, which is Journey. It is an off-brand Journey. Now, for me, that came through most clearly with the puzzles. This game's not about gameplay, but its major gameplay element also happens to be its weakness. You may remember that Journey has puzzles. You probably don't remember what they are, unless you've played the game many times over, but you almost certainly remember navigating through spatial puzzles within the game. The reason that the game was so effective at being a heightened experience rather than just a game is that it never drew attention to its puzzles. They were the core gameplay element, but they weren't so obvious as you were playing through them. They were so seamlessly woven into the experience that they felt like part of the game's fabric, indistinguishable to all the other non-puzzle bits within the game. Spirit of the North's puzzles, meanwhile, are much more overt and much more punishing, not because they're difficult, but because they really stop the flow of the game if you don't engage with them on their terms. So in Journey, if you're stuck on a puzzle, it can be a long time before you actually realise that you're stuck in a puzzle, and by then you've probably overcome it by accident. Because there's just so much to take in with Journey as you play, as you explore, as you just experience the world. There's just so much to absorb that it's easy to get distracted away from the puzzles. With Spirit of the North, meanwhile, if you are stuck, you are stuck. Levels are arbitrarily designed as levels that need to be overcome, and for whatever reason, if you've missed something, then you're blocked from progress via usually a very thick, quite physical wall. The puzzles themselves are fine, and there's nothing in there that's going to frustrate most players, but it's the arbitrary nature of the design that I object to. If you notice that you're playing a level in a video game like this, then it's very poor level design. The whole point of games like Spirit of the North and Journey and every other game that's inspired by this kind of unofficial genre is that it is a seamless journey experience where you're constantly moving forwards and you're not really taking in the fact that you are playing levels. Spirit of the North has one final gameplay element which I feel really detracts from the experience. It has collectibles, and I hate collectibles in my experiential games. There are these staves that are hidden throughout the world, and you need to find them to bring them back to skeletal remains, which are also often hidden somewhere in the world. Doing so frees that spirit from their lock on Earth and allows them to move on or whatever. But the benefit to doing this work doesn't feel apparent, or isn't apparent, for the longest time. And I felt like I was running around the world looking for every tiny gap in space for these staves for the most arbitrary reasons. And the rewards for doing so, the rewards for collecting all this stuff, also didn't feel like it was particularly worth the energy. It felt like this stuff was thrown in there simply because the developers didn't have enough confidence in their own project, in their own work, in their own story that they were telling, to just leave it at that. They felt like they had to add this gameplay stuff in there to make it worth the player's time, and actually it ended up having the opposite effect. Developers, you really need to understand, if you're going to make these kinds of games, people aren't coming to them for the gameplay bits. They're coming to them for that experience. They're coming to these things for the artistry and the storytelling and the way that the game is actually constructed to pass on something potent and emotional. You're just letting yourself down by taking the focus away and forcing players to disrupt their momentum through the game by looking for this nonsense. It's not by no means is Spirit of the North the only game in this kind of unofficial genre that does it, but it's frustrating every time that it happens, and it needs to stop. Journey did not need collectibles in order to be a success. There are also minor issues that do get in the way of the game, in a sense, in terms of it being inexperienced, and kind of show that this is an indie project. While it does look gorgeous and the art direction is absolutely stunning, the camera isn't ideal, and our foxy friend can be a little clunky to navigate at times. For the most part, it's not a big deal at all, but there are moments where platforming is important, and it can be very frustrating to not have that level of precision that you need to really make the most of a platforming style mechanic as a result. There are also the rare moment where the game is poor at signposting where you need to go. So early on I was in a cave, and after a cutscene I needed to look for an exit. Now the ramp to the exit was actually right there in the cave, but it was camouflaged against a wall in a cavern, and it was quite dark in there. So I accidentally backtracked all the way to the back to the start of the cave system, looking for the exit and not finding it. Now it was only a couple of minutes that this wasted of mine, but in a game like this, any moment that is not driving forward is exhausting, and it's downtime that just hampers the game and its momentum and its flow, and that's really disappointing. But now, while I've been quite critical of this game overall, I should emphasize that I do enjoy it. I think it's a very lovely game. I think it's very heartfelt, and I think that the developers have gone into it for the right reasons. I think it's meaningful to them, and they've created something that's quite personal, I would imagine, to at least the at least the head creatives on the team. So I definitely got that sense through it. It's one of those games that is a passion project, and while it has issues, it is certainly worth experiencing anyway. Anyhow, that's enough of this video. Thank you for watching as always. I hope it was interesting, and we'll obviously be back with more videos on more video games in the near future. But in the meantime, if you want to make sure that you don't miss any of my videos, please do click that subscribe button. That way you will get it all. And if you do enjoy my videos and you think I'm worth supporting, then please do consider backing me on Patreon, because that support helps me to ramp up what I want to do with this YouTube channel. I've got lots of plans. So thank you again for watching, and we will see you at the next video.